Well, part of the reason that they're the dumbest corporations in America is the very problem that we're talking about. Money's been used as a weapon to engage corporations for political ends and purposes, and that's the real threat.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in a real sense, it is, other than perhaps China, as you know perfectly well, it might be the greatest threat to the republic that now exists, because after all, the two things that they're trying to do, that the ESG mavens are trying to do, is to reintroduce race, sex, and orientation discrimination throughout the United States, business, school, everywhere else. This time with the vectors reversed. So against straights, against white people, against men. But what they do, what all discrimination does, is to force hiring on the basis of irrelevant characteristics rather than on the basis of merit. And we're seeing the disaster of that play out at Boeing and in a more ideological sense at Disney, and then and many other companies. And then the other thing that they're doing is trying to capture and make very expensive, unreliable, and unavailable energy. And I mean, nobody needs to say that twice. Energy is the font of all human life and all life, and certainly all freedom. So it really is an existential threat.
Well, and yet the polling of Americans says they don't want these things. The people vote with their wallets at Bud Light and Disney and elsewhere. They say, we don't want this woke nonsense. But the American people, aren't we the owners of the American corporations? Not in a collective sense, but in an individual sense, through our pension funds, but also through just our individual IRAs, where we own stocks and bonds and index funds and so forth.
Well, that's right. There aren't that many Americans left anymore. This isn't the 20s who don't have a direct interest in the stock market, whether they realize it or not. But you can look for more concrete markers. BlackRock, for instance, stopped offering ESG-specific investment vehicles in, I think, August, in part because they were losing money. BlackRock recognized that ESG investing loses money, and so they shut down those funds. But they continue, and the other ones do as well, to use all of the assets invested with them to push ESG goals, to force behaviors, as Larry Fink accidentally said once, in ways that are just political, ideological, and that, as you say, demonstration after demonstration has illustrated American investors do not want. And so, you know, they're increasingly hiding that fact. We can hope that they're moving away from it, but if they're not, we can expect mountains of litigation to attach to these companies.
But in a very real sense, ultimately the companies are supposed to be owned by their shareholders, and the index fund or the mutual fund is a pass-through. It's an ability to hold it on behalf of someone else. So at the end of the day, who are supposed to be the real owners of these companies?
Well, obviously, I mean, the question is, whose capital is it? If it's a retirement fund, the retirees worked all their lives to save that money. That's their money, and they should get, their ideology should decide it. And for investors, it's their capitalism. These investment houses that talk about responsible capitalism, what they're doing is stealing the power of other people's capital in order to push their political policy preferences. That's much closer to the genuine definition of fascism than to any kind of capitalism.
Oh, no question. So bottom line is, why are companies no longer serving their shareholders? Why are they doing these bad things? And you just kind of defined it. Where does this all stem from?
Well, here's my theory. So I don't have this guaranteed in any way, but you'll recall the Zuccotti Park protests of 2010, Occupy Wall Street, Eat the Rich, blah, blah, blah. Well, it seems like right about that time, the self-appointed masters of the universe, the giant corporation heads, decided to cut a deal with the left. Listen, lefties, we'll run our corporations according to your policy preferences, decarbonization, equity-based discrimination, etc. In exchange, you let us keep our billions. You let us be billionaires. You and we can join a global class of nobility, and we together will crush the peons.